Okay, so when solving polynomial equations, the first thing we need to look at is we need to consider that these are the exact same as solving a quadratic equation. We're finding the zeros of the equation and we're solving it that way. So what we need to do is we need to factor first. Okay, so if we were looking at this first one, we're going to use synthetic division, the same as if we were just factoring the equation. We're looking for our solution to have a remainder of 0. I'm going to just start with 3. I'm cheating a little bit. I've done this before, so I kind of know the way to do it. But you would try 3, negative 3, 1, positive 1 before you tried anything, and you'd find out that 3 is the best solution. So there, we're finding that therefore x minus 3 is a factor, and therefore x equals 3, or, we'll work on that or right now. We've got 4x squared plus 0x minus 1, so then that's going to be a difference of squares, so 2x minus 1 and 2x plus 1. So then x equals 1/2 from that first bracket, or negative 1/2 from that second bracket. Alright, exactly the same process as a quadratic. We're getting one solution from here, one solution from here, one solution from here. We're changing the equation of 4x cubed minus 12x squared minus x plus 3 into x minus 3, and this all equals 0, 2x minus 1, 2x plus 1 equals 0, and you're getting these 3 solutions. Okay, now we can't always factor. Most times you'll be able to get it down to at least a quadratic. Sometimes you can't, but for what we're doing, we'll deal with it as though you can. If you can't, we're going to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so you could also solve by completing the square. That's just a little bit more work. So quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so if we're looking at a question like this, I'm going to always start the same way. I'm going to try synthetic division and hope that I can get all the way down to no more factors. Okay, a linear type of equation. In this case, we'll go with negative 1. So we've got 1, negative 1, 8, negative 8, 5. Let's see if I can save that. Negative 5 and 0. So therefore, x plus 1 is a factor, and therefore x equals, we're going to have negative 1. Okay, we know that x equals negative 1 because we're putting in the solution over here. Okay, that's the same as the last equation as well, but we found it from that factor. Now we're left with x squared plus 8x plus 5. Okay, now if we look at that, there's no two numbers that we can multiply or add 5 from to get 8. So we're going to use the quadratic formula. Now when we're using the quadratic formula, I'm going to write it all in here. I'm not going to expect you to simplify your radical. The reason is some calculators do it and some don't. Your graphing calculator should do it on your IB exam. So in that case, why would I be marking you doing that? Okay, so we've got here, 64 minus 20 is the square root of 44 over 2. So that would end up being something like negative 8 plus or minus 2 root 11 over 2, which would turn into negative 4 plus or minus root 11. But you can leave it as that. So, or at the top there, x equals negative 8 plus or minus root 44 over 2. Just know that your calculator or the back of the textbook might give you a slightly different answer than your calculator, just due to the fact that it might reduce or simplify that radical. Okay, we need to remember that we can also use complex numbers. Now, some of you might have seen this before and some might not, but I squared is equal to -1. Okay, so the square root of -1 is equal to I. Okay, so with something like the square root of 30 or -36, this can be equal to the square root of 36i, which is equal to 6i. Okay, same thing here. This is root 24i. And then if we were to reduce that, that would be 2 root 6. So root 4 root 6 gives me 24. So 2 root 6i, or 2i root 6. Okay, the I gets rid of the negative. That's going to be something like this. Again, starting with synthetic division, we're going to have 1, 2, we need to include the 0, and -45. We'll go like that. Drop down the 1. Let's start with 3 this time. So 3 is 5, is 15, is 15, 45, and 0. So therefore, x minus 3 is a solution. Therefore, x equals 3. Or, we know there's going to be an or, there's still an equation. X squared plus 5x plus 15. Well, that's not going to work out, so let's go x equals -5 plus or minus square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 15 all over 2 times 1. So we're going to get -5 plus or minus, we've got, what, 25 minus 60. So in the square root, we're going to get a negative number there. So we've got our -35. So I was going to change it in the first step, but then we'll change that to -5 plus or minus root 35i over 2. And remember, I'm not going to reduce that radical. I'm not going to change it at all, just because of some calculators doing it and some not. All right, and there is our solution.